So welcome everyone to the educational webinar hosted by ATA. Thank you guys for joining. Today's topic is Simultaneous Engineering in NX, Live Share plus AI Copilot. Gotta admit, I am very excited for this topic. This has been one of the most requested feature probably for most CAD designer, and I'm just very happy that we are able to collaborate with Siemens to present this feature with you. Uh, this presentation will be made by Mike and Brandon from Siemens, and I'm just the host. They are both subject matter expert on the NX product line, and it's probably the best person or people that I think can chat about the topics and giving you all the capabilities of the feature. So before we dive into the actual webinar, there's just some housekeeping notes. All attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat, or we will have the presenter answer them at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website or the YouTube channel. So before I hand it to Mike and Brandon, just some few slides of overview of ATA engineering and see how we might be able to support your team. All right, so most people recognize ATA as the engineering service company. That's about 70% of our business model. We have over 40 years of experience being the technical partner providing engineering services, including program engineering support, help meet the mission milestones. We really focus on the A&D sector. That's about 70% of our business, and really helping customers solve the high value engineering problems. About who we are, ATA is a employee-owned small business. We have a full-time staff just around 220. I think it grows to 230 now. Most of them have advanced engineering degree. We have 9 regional offices across the US, and we have years and years of experience focusing on design, analysis, and tests, providing that engineering services where customer needed and support their missions. This includes everything from structural dynamics, thermal, fiber acoustic, flutter, fluid dynamics, and more. And one thing to note is test-wise, we are the leading independent modal test group in the US. We have lots and lots of experience, just flying our team to the test article and just conduct GBT and use the same data to feed back to the design and drive a better design and model. So we talked about the 70% of the service sector, and the other 30% is how most of the people you joining the webinar today know about ATA. We are a Siemens Platinum VAR, value-added reseller. We not only sell the product, we also provide software support and training to our customers. We really focus on the tools that we use, primary design, analysis, and tests. For example, you see NXCAD, Simcenter 3D, VMAP, Star CCM Plus. And test-wise, we are one of the 2 or one of the 3 Siemens partner in the US that can provide testing hardware and software support. This includes SCADAs and other GVT-related test equipments. I think AT is really unique in the Siemens VAR world because we sell what we use. We have the service segment, and we also have the software side. And our customers really appreciate our familiarity to the tools. This shows in our hotline support, which every time you call our hotline, you are speaking to an engineer who actually use the software every day and understand the problem. In addition, we teach a variety of classes, primarily dealing with simulation. We generate all the Siemens training material for Simcenter Nastran, and a lot of times when you wanted to get a class for Nastran, it's actually hosted by ATA, and Siemens just taking the registration. All right, last slide before I hand it to Mike and Brandon. Just want to encourage people to visit the ATA website. We are making it better. We put all the resources over there, like you can find APIs, white papers, free resources. You can grab it from there based off on the product type and the product. All right, with that being said, just happy to introduce today's speaker, Mike and Brandon, who will be taking us to the journey of the NX new feature and some really cool things. Take it away.
Great, thank you, Mason. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen okay.
Yep, I can see it.
Excellent. So welcome everyone. Thank you for your time today to talk about our topics for Designcenter. And here's our agenda over about the next 40 minutes roughly. Just level set with everybody just about our Siemens Accelerator portfolio and Designcenter X and X, just to make sure everybody is aware of where we're at with that. And then we'll cover the 4 topics. So obviously the first one, intelligent design decisions and guidance using Design Copilot. This is something newer into the NX environment. So we'll talk about that for AI. We'll also then, one of the key things was the simultaneous engineering with live share. So Brandon and I will go through that, present that to you. And then we had a couple other pieces just along the same lines of collaboration, right? So cross-team collaboration using our Team Connect tool. And then also showing you a little bit about how you could do multi-user virtual design reviews with the NX Immersive Collaborator. And then at the end, we'll just close out with a little bit how to get started. So where can you find more information about this and the licensing and those kinds of things as we get going. So as Mason mentioned, please put your questions into the chat or the Q&A piece there, and we'll take those as we go. And then at the end, if there's any additional ones before we close out, we'll address those. So just to level set, Siemens Accelerator is our portfolio of software, hardware, as Mason mentioned, ATA is a key partner there. But, we're focusing on the mechanical design today, but just to make sure that you understand the breadth of our portfolio, we go from electrical design, electrical CAD design, simulation, manufacturing, product lifecycle management, all of those areas and much more. And all of our investment, everything that we do at Siemens is around that comprehensive digital twin. So obviously Brandon and I, we represent the NX side, and that's really where we think is one of the key drivers of your digital twin. And so one thing that you may have heard, if you have not, we'll bring this up, but all of our products, you'll hear Teamcenter, for our product lifecycle management. You'll hear SimCenter for simulation and on. Now what we've done is we've gone through a rebranding of our mechanical CAD. So you're going to hear us use Designcenter a lot. We might slip back into other terms that we're accustomed to, but you're going to hear us and you're going to see the branding Designcenter. So when you see that, just know that it is to align with the rest of our portfolio. And that does mean anything from, NX is fit underneath Designcenter. So again, one of the key releases this past year was Design Copilot. And so for those of you that have been NX users for a while, you might know that we were the first to leverage AI and machine learning into NX. We actually did that back in 2019. So it's not just within the last year, but we've been building our expertise and capabilities inside the NX environment. So everything from, again, command prediction was to analyze how you're using the tool, start to do machine learning on, hey, this is how I build it. These are the commands, and actually present those to the user to speed their process along. And from that time, we were doing things with the command finder, command search, things with selections, prediction. So all these different pieces to help make the users more productive as you're going through that process. And then finally, in last year, was the introduction of Copilot. So you'll see that not only in the Designcenter tools, but in Teamcenter, SimCenter, in our CAM product, all of them are adopting tools like this to help increase your productivity. And one of the big things around this is, AI is trained well in these large language models, whether that be text or images or video. It's really good at that. The thing that it doesn't do so well yet is, what about the engineering models, right? It doesn't really have that capability. And that's where Siemens comes in. We're using our expertise to augment these large language models for things like mechanical design, things like simulation, so that we can expand that capability. So that's an important piece that Siemens is bringing to the marketplace. And so again, the Design Copilot is something now that is built into your NX environment. You can use this, speak naturally, put those into the queue line, ask the system about that. And that could be everything from a specific command. It could be to some design practices. We'll show you in our demo coming up, but everything is trained on our NX API. So it's not what you'll see just documentation, but how the system functions, and it'll actually prompt you back with information as you go through that. So let's jump into one of the demos so that you get a chance to see how this actually works. So in this example, we'll be doing a couple different things. So Command Finder is one of those. It might seem simple, but it actually is using some of the AI to help narrow down the search, find the right things that you actually need to work on. And so in our storyline today, on this particular vehicle, we have something that we want to do some designer level simulation. And so what we can do is, as we're working, we can start to fire off the Copilot, and that will allow us to then start to ask these questions, these natural language questions. How do I do this? What is this for? Those types of things. And so if you see in this particular example, these are the brackets that hold the hydraulic system for the entire dump on the truck, right? So they have to be very strong. They have to be able to hold up under quite a bit of weight and a lot of interaction there with that as the movement of the hydraulic cylinder. So what you see is on the right-hand side, you can turn on the Copilot, you can leave it sitting there. And as I put in, hey, how I saw this thing performance predictor, what is that? So you can see that it feeds back information. It also gives us any related questions that you might want to add on to, or you could add to your own in the queue line. But what's nice is then you get a series of steps, step by step. How would I work through this? It also, anywhere you see those little numbers, it actually then will open up documentation on the left-hand side in the browser. It'll put that there so that you can work from that. As you can see, then we understand, okay, where is the performance predictor? Now, what do I start doing with that, right? And so again, I can refer to the Copilot on the right as step by step. How do you walk through this thing? What do you do? So a big departure from maybe some things that you saw in the past with like stress and vibration. They were very hard-coded menus, very straight structure. Here, the Copilot's going to help us and guide us exactly what we need to do. So as I go through and start to complete some of those tasks, you can see that as we complete those, just like any other menu inside of NX, the little red asterisks are things that we need to complete. And as we do that, it'll start checking them off in green, right? And so again, if there's any point along this process, I can either search for additional commands, I can ask different things for the Copilot. So one of these tools that actually is AI enabled, the select similar faces. So if I have a lot of a certain shape, I can pick some of it and then let the system go and find all the rest of those on the part. So that is the selection prediction. That's one of those things that's been added over time that now will go and speed that process. This example only has like 8 objects, but if you had 100 objects, you wouldn't want to have to go pick all those separately. You want to be able to do that in one fast selection. So I've started to go down and get further through the process. So maybe there's something I want to find out a little bit more about the loading for this hydraulic piece that's pressing down on our bracket, right? So again, you can see that you can either go to additional help. If you want to fire off the actual command, you can do that. So think about new users. This is really going to help them, not just for FEA, but anything that you're doing inside of NX. It's going to help guide them, help get them to the commands and functions they need quicker, bring them up to speed faster, as well as then just in our normal processes, right? New functions, new things that we want to learn, it'll be able to get you going much faster than, oh, I've got to go maybe take some training or I got to do something else. You can drive it all from within the Copilot. So, again, not to make it a big FEA demo, but the idea was, hey, we've got our results. We're kind of checking it out. We're looking at, the displacement. We're looking at the maximum stress, and then, factor of safety, right? So the key here was just not only is it the simulation type things that I'm going to ask, but hey, after we analyze this, we look at it, I want to ask it about making some design changes to this. So in there, you can see then on the right side, since we're looking at some of the results, the command prediction is helping. Hey, you probably need to look at the stress values. You probably need to do some of these other changes to the part. So that's what you see on the very far right side of Copilot is the command prediction. So that's not just tracking the last 10 commands, it's actually providing me, hey, we think you probably need this next. So I don't have to go all over the environment. I can use that toolbar to keep working. So as I mentioned, my next step was to, hey, how should I make some changes to those ribs in there? What are some options that I could do? In this case, I'm asking it about some of the synchronous commands. Could I do some offsets? What could I drive from that? And so again, you're presented with that right at your fingertips. Again, we can go right to where that command is. Again, helping the learning, helping the speeding that process along. And so that's part of the driver behind it. So, sometimes people think, well, I want the Copilot to, automate something. At this stage, our Copilot is to help you as the user through your process. It's not strictly an automation tool as it is today. So that's the interaction that we're having with Copilot, as I do my work. And so those are some of the things. The nice thing about Performance Predictor is, it's very fast. It's very concise on what you need to do from a designer level. And it really makes it very easy to compare what we did before with what we have now. So in this case, hey, did we improve the displacement? Did we improve the stress results? Did we increase factor of safety? And that's what's in the navigator, right? So as you look at that, you can also track, what did we do? How much did it drop? How much did it improve? And so things like that, you might want to ask it questions about factor of safety. So again, it's not just an NX question. It can be outside of that you're going to ask it about, like, hey, I can't quite remember about this particular, topic. What about this, right? What factor of safety should I have? How are there ways that I could improve factor of safety? So those types of things as well. But, again, all the details are right there at your fingertips. It allows you to then, answer your questions, get moving much faster than you would even if you were going just to documentation, right? This really helps out in your day-to-day work. So that's a little bit of a look at, going through that. I think the two key things really are that learning curve of the software. There are things that you don't use all the time. And so it's nice to be able to ask it questions about that and get that information. And then also about just the combination of using Copilot with some of the other tools that we have, right? The selection prediction, the command prediction, command finder, all of those things working together to help boost your productivity, speed along those processes. So that's a little bit on the Copilot. So the next topic we had then was the live share. And this is really one of the things that is brand new coming out in the 2512 release, which was just this past December. And so this actually now enables you to work inside the part files together with other users. We had techniques in the past where you could break it up. You might use part modules to break apart a big component, work on it, and then merge it back together. But this is where we're actually working inside the NX environment, Brandon and I together, to make changes to update the geometry together. So if you think about it, it's just like if you use Microsoft Office tools, right? So we use Teams and we had the PowerPoint. So Brandon and I are working together. As we make changes in that, it's all being committed to the same file. We're not having our own copies and trying to merge it. This is the same idea that we have with the live share. And so in there, you know, what's the important pieces? One, it's knowing who else is in there, right? So we invite people in. It's not just anybody can come in. It's also using the managed environment, right? Teamcenter to manage these interactions. And it also then has quick connections to things like Microsoft Teams, where we can start up a share and have that communication with it as well. So it's all of these things letting us do this in real time together. And so what's important is that user presence, being aware. So if you're in with Designcenter X, you are a named user. We know who is in the system. It's also with the data management side. So again, you know all the people that are going to be working together inside of this particular live share meeting. And as I mentioned, you know, Microsoft Teams chat is right in there. We can start and launch that right from inside the NX environment so that Brandon and I can communicate. We can start up, you know, not just the text share, but we can do the video share and work through that together. So with that, we're going to go through this demo. You're going to see all of these elements, the how to do the chat, the user awareness, who's in the system. We'll also make those multiple design changes so you can see the impact and where we're actually working and how we're making changes. And then at the end, how you can review, okay, what did we do in this particular session and how does that impact the design? So I'm going to go ahead and let Brandon start with this. He'll cover you for a portion to get us kicked off. Then I'll have some interaction with him as we're going back and forth. So Brandon, if you'd like to take it.
Yep. So we're going to kick off the process. Again, I'm logged in as myself, Brandon. So we're inside a Designcenter X and X, and we are in the managed environment. So the first thing we want to do is find our assembly. So you notice I'm just doing a quick search up here on a pump assembly. Quickly, we get back feedback, you know, all the things that are in a database that may say pump. We can start to filter that down, look at different types, different categories. Using the dynamic filters on the left, you know, I want to look for a CAD design revision. I know that Mike's the owner of the assembly, so I'm going to go ahead and filter down to Mike, and then we see our pump assembly that we want to work on. So looking over here on the right, I see the preview, I see some of the attributes and metadata to verify. Open that up a little bit further, we see the actual bill of material or assembly structure here listed. I can go through and start to look at the parts that I know that we need to make changes to, like the single pulley, the crankcase itself, and then the heat shield, the sheet metal part. And I can see the quick preview of those components over on the right, again, along with the properties and the metadata. So what I want to do now is start some collaboration with Mike. So I'm going to go ahead and create a task referencing this pump assembly. And it's urgent. We need to get it done as soon as possible, right? Like everything else we do in our job daily. But we'll go ahead and assign a due date, you know, put a description about the changes, those parts we need. And then I also want to add Mike to participate in this task. So I'll just search him and add him to the task. So we'll do a quick little look here. You know, the priority's good, the description's good. We'll go ahead and create that task. Now, we're creating that task relative to that pump assembly. So the nice thing here is we have that traceability. So if somebody's on that pump assembly, I can see that there's this open task associated with it and the urgency. Mike?
Right. So on my side, you know, as I'm in the environment, I can see this task from Brandon. He sent this over to me. It gives me a description of what things we should be looking at. I'm going to take a second to review the content that he attached to it. We can investigate. Oh, yeah, let's open this up. Let's see what he's actually talking about. What are some things that we might be either having issues or that, hey, we're just still working in our design process. Once we have the file loaded, Then in here, I can see from the assembly navigator, oh, Brandon's already working on the pulley. Maybe I should check in with him. Let me see what's going on. So I can see that he's in the system. He's actually in there. And now we can do join a chat, right? A quick Teams chat that I can, ask him, hey, is this something you can work on now? Can we review this together? And just get that quick exchange back and forth right from the NX environment. So this is already set up. It's ready to go, as we're working. And so once I get his feedback, now I can go ahead and actually create the live share meeting. So this is not using Teams. This is actually using the live share inside the NX environment. So when I create that, it will then create that meeting key for me that I can share with Brandon through the Teams invite, right? So I'll give him that connection. He then will be able to take that and add that into his environment. So I'll give it back to Brandon here.
Yep. So my session's on the right, Mike's is on the left. So I'm going to take that code that he put it right inside the Teams chat and use that to join Mike's live share meeting. So what you'll notice is Mike on the left already has the pump assembly open, and what I'm being, involved in, or what's coming into my screen, is through the live share session. So what you're going to notice first is we're going to make our changes in this live share session together, right? And, make sure that we have that simultaneous engineering. The first thing we're going to do is we're both going to make a change to the same part in the context of the assembly, in this case, this crank house. So, if you look at it, there's an offset datum plane sitting up there above. The first change that Mike's going to make is change the offset of that plane. So you see the datum plane, we'll just change that offset a little bit with the expression down there. Obviously it's updating in Mike's screen, but then through the live share, it also updates on my screen at the same time. Again, in the same part, I'm going to go ahead and make a change now. I need to make a change to the outer diameter of the crankcase. So that base sketch up there, I'm going to go ahead and increase that diameter just a little bit. Again, I'm making the change here in my side on the right. But Mike's going to get those changes updated through the live share there on the left. I'm also going to make another change in this part while I'm in here, change the serial number, the embossed text there, change that from a 4 to a 5, and get that change. So notice I'm rotating independently in the session. That's not affecting Mike, but Mike's getting the changes updated through the live share. Now we want to go ahead and make a change in another part. So Mike's taking this one. He's going to go ahead and edit the heat shield, the sheet metal component down at the bottom. Got some feedback that we need some more louvers in there. You notice it's part of a pattern. There's only 3 occurrences. So Mike's going to go ahead and increase that to 4. And then over on the right in my screen with the live share, you're going to see that 4th louver update and appear. I'm going to go ahead and make a change to a different component, the single pulley there on the side. We got some feedback there about the lightning cutouts, that needs to be decreased a little bit. So I'm going to change the diameter there and make that a little bit smaller. Again, we're both making changes on each side, and through the live share, we're getting those updates across to each other. So we've wrapped up our changes across those components in the context of this assembly. Mike's just checking to see if there's any other collaboration notifications and so on. The other thing we want to do is take a look at some of the live share information itself. So Mike's going to go up, because he's the host of the meeting, and look at the meeting report. The nice thing here is you can see who made changes to what. So again, we both changed the crankcase. We're both in the context of the assembly. Mike made a change to the sheet metal part, and I made a change to the pulley. So at this time, Mike's going to go ahead and start to shut down the live share meeting. What's happening here is it's saying, hey, before you shut this down, let's go ahead and save these changes back to the database. Mike?
Yep. So once I'm done, we've saved any changes, we've revised any parts that we needed to back into Teamcenter. And so my last step is to just go back to my task and sign off what I've done. So, based on what Brandon had told us, we needed these parts. We've worked together on it to complete that. And now we can complete the task here so that it goes back, and that way Brandon can track that on his side. So I've completed it here. It's done out of my inbox. I've done what I needed to do. Brandon can go back to his side, and you'll see here then, as he also goes to the built-in Teamcenter, he can go to his back to that assembly and look at any of the details on, yep, everything's been revised, it's been updated, and here's the details on that task that we were both working on. So you'll see here some things that we ended up working on to complete that. So that's live share, right? That's the interaction. And I think it's obvious what the benefit is, but we'll recap it, right? It's just that having multiple engineers or designers working in a component, an assembly at the same time. Obviously, you're not trying to change the same feature, but you're changing areas of the model. Now, we were doing all design changes. You could be doing design creation, okay? Also in that type of format. The big things are that direct connect to the Microsoft Teams so we can chat and send the meeting invite. That user presence, us knowing who's in there. Besides just looking at the assembly navigator, we're seeing right there at the top who are the people that are working at the same time with us. And then those change notifications, it might have been subtle as it was going, but when Brandon made his changes, you saw things update on my side. So it literally was real time. It wasn't that I had to stop, reload, change parts. It was making those real-time changes in there. And then finally, that whole idea of the summary report. Who did what? We're good to go. Let's save all of that information and continue working forward. So again, something I think that will be a big impact to a lot of people being able to do this type of work. We're working on a small assembly and some small details, but if you wanted to have more people and much bigger engagement, it's very doable with the live share. So as we continue then, a couple other little pieces on the collaboration discussion, right? So Team Connect. So one of the things that we've had is we've had different viewers, right? So there were tools for design, there were tools for mechatronics, there were different things of where people can go for this. And so with Designcenter X, what we want to do is unify that so that you don't need all these different ones, right? We can do all these different tasks within one viewer. We also want to make sure that the native data, right? Because a lot of times you can use other tools that are neutral format information, but if you want people in the native data, the Team Connect viewer is really helpful for that. We can stay in the NX environment. It could be project managers looking at the data. It could be your manager. It could be manufacturing or quality, any of those people that want to get involved with the process. So whether it's design reviews or procurement or even manufacturing questions, all you have to do is use the same tool that everybody else, is using, right? But they don't need a costly CAD seat to do that type of work. And so all of these things that we're going through today is around this whole ability to reduce IT complexity for the users. There's not the setup and the things that you normally would do with a lot of other tools. And so the idea is, we've already kind of mentioned this, but the idea is pulling these together into the Team Connect. So your design viewer that you had, so you might have heard it as NX Viewer, that is part of this. And so we'll talk about licensing later, but it's a seat of the NX Team Connect. It's included, the design viewer. So all the things for opening parts, assemblies, drawings, looking at PMI, all of that's in there. The other piece is the MCD player. There used to be a separate download install for that. Well, that's merged into this. So the seat of Team Connect has that in it. And then things that you can do on top of that is the digital markup. You can do those types of things, right? So in there, it does use the base seat of Team Connect with the value-based licensing to pull some of that DMU, because you're actually creating content, which the viewer was meant not to create, just to view. but that can be done with the value-based licensing, as well as then the immersive engineering. So in there, uh, we have with a regular seat of CAD that you would access and use it, but you might have a manager, you might have a supplier, you might have somebody else that wants to be able to participate, in the design review with immersive. And you'll see a little bit of that as we go forward. So just some short examples of how this works then. So that the NX viewer in the past, it's just a cut down version of NX, right? So it's just the viewing and those types of tools. So in this case, we're using the design viewer and we're using tokens to drive the digital mockup. So in there, you can do things like, hey, I want to be able to set this up for a design review between Brandon and I. So what I have then are, snapshots of the assembly. So in different states, right? So this is something that if you were doing that, you'd have to keep turning on and off a lot of different buttons. Here, you can prepare a DMU session and then just literally walk through. So if I want to hide components, if we want to go through in section, we want to see certain areas of interest, you can do that and get that all set up. And the idea is, you're creating these snapshots and states of your product assembly as you go through all of this. So things like that you're able to do. You can do things like, an exploded type view as well. So, hey, maybe we want to look at this rear axle. We want to move some of those parts off. You can do all that, again, inside the digital mockup. And that way, again, save these snapshots to basically go from 1 to 5. We'll step through all of those, and then people can comment and maybe determine, hey, we should probably do maybe a live share to make some changes, or maybe we should present this with immersive that we can go through even more detail with internally or with the customer. So those are some things that you can develop with this. Other things, there are view and markup in here. So it's just depending on, people say, well, which product should I use? Just depends on how much native data do you want to work with. So this is one way to do that with the DMU, add on to the viewer and be able to mark it up, put dimensions, those kinds of things, take measurements and such, and build that inside of this. So just one way to, use the viewer with some additional capabilities inside of it. Okay. So one others is the MCD player that's been merged into the Team Connect viewer. So before you would have a separate tool for this. If you're doing any of the mechatronics concept design and virtual commissioning, again, there might be people on the shop floor that want to be able to review this. They don't need a full seat of NX MCD to do that. They can then use the player to review and kind of check, hey, is that the automation that we expect? Is this how the robots are moving? This is our conveyors and things like that. That's also a part of this, as we mentioned. So that way you can actually see what's going on, much easier than a drawing, right? So you have drawings, you have those other things to work from, but having the 3D movie, that's pretty powerful to help you with what you're working on out in the shop. So that's a way to do this with the MCD player built into that. And then the last one is immersive engineering, right? So having these design reviews going to the next level. So this is where inside the viewer, you actually have access to things like the immersive desktop display. You can actually fire off the headset as well. So if you want to do that, we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up, but you can do all of that. And so that's another way to access and, again, spread that out to more people across your organization that do not require a full CAD seat to do that work. And so you can see here, we're just kind of in the NX viewer, removing some parts, and you're seeing in the immersive environment, here's the changes that we're doing from there. So again, just a way that for our Design X customers, this is the new viewing mechanism for that, right? For those seats that you can extend. and just expanding your stakeholders, giving them more access to all of the data that you have in the system. And then finally, we'll cover the immersive engineering. So this has been a really exciting, it's been a big change in how you look at it. A lot of people are like, yeah, well, VR has been around for a long time, but what you can do with Immersive Explorer and Designer and now Collaborator, which is the newer piece to this, is just taking that design review and that collaboration and interaction to a new level. And so again, you have this where there's different ways you can look at this. People can do it from the desktop. They can do it from the viewer we just showed you. You can do it with the headsets to be interactive inside of this. This is something that both Brandon and I, we have them. We've been doing work with this. We've been showing customers how this works. And so it's really, if you haven't had a chance to see it, it's well regarded. It was the CES Innovation Award last year, and having that XR headset. So it's got the 4K resolution. It has its own controllers, so a stylus and a ring to work. I would say the two things I really like about it is, the balance. So it's not pushing on your neck, it's not pulling you down. And the fact that I can use it with my glasses so that it adjusts and fits properly with that as we're going through that work. And so, in there, different things that you can do, right? So one would be like the design reviews. So if you're setting the scene, you can use something called a virtual monitor, where we have NX embedded inside of the environment so that you can work. There's tools for transforming and grabbing objects, measurements, markup, sticky notes. So to me, when you watch this, as opposed to just using the viewer by itself, this to me is something that is, it takes it to a much higher level of fidelity that you can see. So one is that environment that you're looking at, that racetrack, that's inside the headset. This is what you're seeing inside. The, obviously the rendering that's been applied to the 3D model, it almost looks like it's, the real car. It is a 3D model of the vehicle or the aircraft. And so what you can see is you can change different environments. You get all the lighting. It's using all of the photo rendering materials. And as I mentioned, you can use things like the virtual monitors. So I actually have NX inside of the headset. So I don't have to be flipping up the goggles, flipping them down. I'm working right inside of here. So the commands that you're familiar with inside of NX, you're using that then to drive what happens in the VR environment, right? So here, if I need to, remove the hood, I can now see inside. I'm using that right inside of the environment. There's things for reviewing. So as we mentioned, I might want to transform some parts. I want to see the assembly bill of material inside of there. You can see what's happening is with the stylus, you can point at things, it can select them. You can also use, as we got closer there, it's a grabbing tool. So by using that, we can actually select and hold on to those parts and move them. Things like this with the grabbing tool holds onto that. You can move those outside to look at them. And again, measurements, get real-time measurements, accurate measurements inside the model that we can see. And it is to scale. That's the key, right? So if you're going in, marking it up, putting the sticky notes, those types of things, all of that is stored with it. And we can always go back to that. You can create those different snapshots. So I think you could see the difference between doing a design review here and the one that we just talked about in Team Connect. Just the level of depth, the one-to-one, all of that is a huge step up in what you can do. And then another area then is design changes, right? So if you want to make changes on the fly with that, you can do that as well. So the whole idea is with that virtual monitor, I can actually run MCD inside of this. I can select objects and make changes to them. Again, if we have any save snapshots, we can go back to those specific areas. Oh, I see we found a problem. We get down to make a change. Besides the virtual reality, we have the mixed reality. So I can actually I see that part in front of me, and I can select it with the ring that I have on my left hand and move it around. I can move that and then use my NX environment to make changes to that. So I can see what I'm doing in my NX environment and in real time updating. And that's also a big thing with this. When you're in NX, it's a one button push to send it to the VR headset. There's not all this prep work. There's not all these things you need to do in order to get that into the environment. It's very quick to get that information. So again, you can see here as I'm making changes, I'm getting that real-time feedback, and I could see, you know, what's happened to the part just inside the environment. Okay, so those are some of the different changes and things that you could do, you know, as you're working inside of there. But the key thing is that virtual NX environment inside the headset. I'm not moving back and forth. I'm just staying in there doing the work that I'm already accustomed to doing. Okay, and then the last one, which is the exciting addition here that we'll finish up with, is the multi-user collaboration. So this is now, it's not just me by myself or just seeing, we can actually put, and Brandon and I have done this. We've both worked from our different locations in Ohio, and being able to then be in a session, working together, doing these different, you know, sectioning and measuring and marking up and doing all of that. And so you can see the little avatars. So it is kind of funny initially when you see, you know, Brandon's on this side of the car, I'm on this side, and we're working together. But the power of Designcenter X is that it's named user, it knows who's in the system. You can work globally with that. The license is a global license since it's named user. And we can go in and you can, again, see other people moving around. We can be communicating through that to tell them, hey, this is what's going on. Let's take a look here. Let's do this section through, and then let's find out, you know, what's going on inside of that. Another thing that I like is that this will get to is, you know, there's areas of a vehicle, an aircraft, you know, machine, you couldn't physically get in there very safely. Well, here with this, we can actually remove certain parts. We can get into areas and take a look at that you would have a very hard time just physically doing that. And so this is the example here in the wheel well. You know, there's some things we want to change. We need to adapt how we can move some parts out, how we can get our avatar inside of there to look and see what's actually going on. Those are some powerful things. And again, that one-to-one scale, you know, we model all the time and we see it. You know, that's how big or small things are on the screen. It always looks the same. It could be, you know, a sunglasses, or it could be, you know, an aircraft carrier. It all looks the same. But here inside this environment, you really get that's one-to-one scale. Okay, so those are some things there with the collaboration. So the powerful thing here is everybody can get into this. Only the meeting leader that starts the session is the one for the collaboration that requires the license there. When we do the collaboration at the end, just one person is pulling the license for that. So again, I think you could see the difference in what that looks like than maybe some of your design reviews with some of the other tools. So how do we get started? We'll close this out then. We're getting close to the end. Licensing wise. So Design Copilot, it's part of our value-based licensing. It is something that's only available with Designcenter X, NX, which is our SaaS solution. So those are some things that Mason can talk to you about if you have questions. So it's VBL that works with that, and it requires 5 tokens as you're using that. The live share, it does not have a specific license. It actually uses our advanced assemblies. So in there, you can use that through value-based licensing as well. So it uses 26 tokens to operate. The big things here is you do have to be in a Teamcenter managed environment, and you do have to have the advanced assemblies to do that. Those are the 2 things that are important there. The Team Connect, this is its own separate license. Again, this is really for people that are using, again, Designcenter X, because there are only 4 people a small amount of products that we talk about when we talk about Designcenter X. So this is the separate seat that you could actually do the work that we showed today. And then finally, immersive engineering. So you can do, this is strictly value-based as well. So there are no add-on modules, but you can use Immersive Explorer and Designer, both our NX seats and our NXX seats. So you see the token counts there. The only piece that is not available in NX, you have to be in Designcenter X, which is the SaaS license, is the collaborator that we did here at the end. And why is that? We talked a little bit. You need to have, a managed environment. You have to have the named user so that you can understand where everybody's at as you're working in that for collaborators. So those are some of the things there. Obviously, Mason and team at ATA can talk to you more about it, as well as, Brandon and myself to share with you. As far as resources, things that you might get into, the documentation is a good one. Obviously, if you have Copilot, you can ask it about these things, but in our documentation, it goes over some of the Copilot interface and some of the usage there. As far as the live share, there is some detail on collaborating inside the documentation. So it has a page that talks a little bit about this. So again, a very simple process to get going. So there's not an overwhelming amount of information. You read the one page or so, you can get this up and going very quickly. And then immersive, if you haven't seen this live, definitely recommend that, what can be done with the headsets. And so there's some information in the documentation for each of the elements we talked about, as well as then the head-mounted display, right? So that obviously is something that you would need to purchase, and that's something that you could work through Mason and ATA to add that to your environment. So just to close it out, here were our 4 areas that we focused on today were, our Copilot, the live share, Team Connect, and immersive engineering. These really all are focused at, how can we globally connect? How can we instantly collaborate on our work, and really do this without IT complexity. The tools, the way we have it set up, it was very simple for both Brandon and I, living in, 2 opposite ends of Ohio, being able to quickly work and do all of the things, both from the live share and the immersive collaboration very easily. So with that, I want to thank everybody and, see, Mason, if there were any other questions or anything in the chat for what we did today. Looks like we have maybe about 5 more minutes.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. This has been amazing. I did see a few questions, but I think Brandon answered them. And at the very last slide, you have licensing and requirements, which I think is very helpful.
Okay.
So just a quick note to everyone in the webinar or watching this afterward on YouTube. ATA hosted one for the VR headset with Siemens as well. So highly recommend to go take a look at that one. It's amazing capabilities inside NX. And also, I think, Mike, you and I covered another one for the Copilot, or like the new feature in NX
Yes.
2506 or 2512, which I think that one's also recommended to take a look at. I do have one question. So is there a limit of like how many people can be inside a live share session at one time?
That's a good question. We've not been given a realistic, but I think, based on the size of the part, the complexity, you probably don't want, 10 people in there. You may need, a couple people, but there's not been a limit that I'm aware of that says, you can only use 2 users or 5 users. There's some examples that we saw where there was a handful of people doing that in a live share when we were learning about the technology. So it doesn't have a hard and fast rule, but it's probably more just how many people do you really want working, in that particular assembly or that particular part that you're working on.
Gotcha. Makes sense. The other question I have is, you mentioned about this live share requires a in-place PLM system like Teamcenter,
Mhm.
mostly active workspace. Does it matter if that Teamcenter needs to be hosted on cloud or they can be locally hosted?
So that's a good question. We probably need to do a follow-up on that specifically. Like, is it a Teamcenter X requirement, or is it just Teamcenter in general that works with that? All the examples that Brandon and I we've gone through, we're using a Teamcenter X environment to do that, right? Because of the named user, the awareness and those pieces of it. Right now, I would be leaning towards it's for an X environment, but I think we need to clarify that internally for you guys.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Um, all right, I don't see any other questions here. I think we can wrap this up with 2 minutes back to the audience. Thank you again, Mike and Brandon, for this webinar. I think it's been amazing, very helpful. I want to quote Ray's comment here, truly amazing, valuable capabilities. Congratulations, Siemens. And yeah, this kind of what I was thinking too. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.